now tuned in to the cold, hard truth. Cayman's #1 hard-hitting live podcast show, where we feature some straightforward conversations on political, social, and celebrity news and all things happening in the Cayman Islands and around the world. This show was created to give the people a voice and a means of being involved and informed without any filters. Sometimes it gets crazy, but we always keep it real. We bring you the tea, piping hot, so grab your favorite beverage and join the conversation via WhatsApp at 324-1612. Email tips at CaymanMarlRoad.com. Now, here's your host, Sandy Hill, broadcasting live from the beautiful Cayman Islands.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. What's going on? Lots of excitement here in the Cayman Islands, and we are bringing it all to you, the good people tuning in. Blessings to everyone. Good morning, Miss Morna. Miss Morna can now enjoy her tea, her coffee, her Milo, whatever it is she's drinking. She can enjoy it in her CMR mug. Thank you so much, Olivia, for tuning in. How are you? Big shout out to Miss Barbara, who's got it locked in this morning. It's Tagalong Thursdays, folks, which means we take a little bit of time out of our day to talk about happenings in the Filipino community. And trust me, I feel like I need to have a Tagalong Thursday every single Thursday because there are a lot of issues that our Filipina and Filipino brothers and sisters bring to my attention that they would like addressed. And we're going to continue to talk about scammer Irene Garcia, because you guys wouldn't believe that she has scammed a whole lot of people. It's so incredibly sad. Good morning, Barbara. Good morning to Miss Maria. Larry is here from New York. Joy is here. Celeste, beautiful good morning to you. Hello, Siobhan. Lizette is also here saying that what a beautiful day in the Cayman Islands, our paradise. God bless every one of us. And absolutely, it is a beautiful day here. And we are so incredibly fortunate. So, we have got a lot to talk about. Trust me. All right, let's get to it. So, we have often members of the local community integrated with people from elsewhere. We have a very diverse community. I mean, Cayman, given our physical and geographical size, and even just our sheer numbers, we have a very, what most would consider, large expat population. And there's a lot of integration. Some people say we should have more of this. Some people are not quite used to the integration, but it is what it is. And at the end of the day, I think giving everyone a voice in this community is very important. So Caymanians, obviously, being Caymanians, this is our country. We need to be fighting for what is right. We need to be fighting for people to not be disenfranchised in any way. But that fight doesn't extend just to Caymanians. So I want to say this to sort of preface my comments, because I feel like some people are of the opinion that only certain people should have rights in a community. I'm always like, no. Because listen, here's the most important thing, right? When people start to disenfranchise others for whatever reason, and they make an excuse, oh, well, they're Jamaicans, they're Hondurans, they're foreign nationals, they're Filipinos. If you sit back and think that that sort of behavior is okay, it will only be a matter of time before you yourself will become a victim. And then you're going to wonder, how did this happen? How did we get here? So in my opinion, and you guys can certainly tell me what you think, it is imperative that we all have basic human rights, regardless of where you come from, who you are. There are just certain things that should be universal. So we have a large Filipino community here, and I think that they need to have their say in the Cayman Islands as well. They have people both inside and outside of their own community who are taking advantage of them. And let's just face it, folks, wrong is wrong, no matter how you slice it. So we have talked about this lady before, Irene Garcia. And unfortunately, her shenanigans continue, and more victims have come forward to share their stories of how they have been defrauded by her. And I'm going to tell you why I use that specific term and why I am of the opinion that the police need to intervene and assist her victims. Now, on the flip side of this, within the Filipino community, they are, a very close-knit community, but I find that sometimes they also believe in perpetrating a certain image of themselves, right? So you guys know that when Filipinos leave the Philippines and they come to the Cayman Islands, they actually go through a government, almost like a little indoctrination program, where they say to them, right, you're going overseas. These are the expectations that we have of you. This is how you should handle yourself in the Cayman Islands. This is the behavior, that we expect of you. We don't want you to go there breaking any laws and doing all of these types of things. You're supposed to be on your best behavior. And I must say, years ago, when I first heard about this policy or this program, I should say, I actually thought, wow, this is pretty good. I wish more countries, before they sent their nationals overseas, would try to educate them about, right, you're traveling overseas, this is what's expected of you. Because maybe we would get less people who are misbehaving, or fewer people, I should say, who are misbehaving. So I always thought that was a fairly good idea. But one of the observations that I've made is, because there's this pressure on that community to put their best foot forward, even when members of their community don't do so, they try to hide and cover it up. And it's sad, because they do so at the peril of their own people. And so they have this idea, and I've seen it perpetrated. Don't talk to anybody outside of the community. If people do something to you, you forgive quickly, you move on, you don't call the police, you don't seek any real justice. So this has been the case. A few Filipinos have contacted me, and they've said, Ms. Sandy, after coming on your program, members of the Filipino community have said they're upset that we are airing our dirty laundry, so to speak. And that is quite unfortunate, because, at the end of the day, everyone deserves an opportunity to be heard, and everyone deserves an opportunity to have justice. And unfortunately, when that isn't happening, that's when you start to have additional issues arising within any community or any organizations. So I heard it. It was so ironic. The last time we were supposed to do this show, we never got around to doing it because we were just so busy. I actually heard it from several different Filipinos that they had been contacted by members of their community, essentially saying that, why are you going to Cayman Mall Road? At the end of the day, don't tell anybody in this country what is going on. In relation to Irene, as well as in relation to, what's her name now? Oh gosh, the other Filipino young lady who had all the drama. She works at the salon. Everywhere she goes, money goes missing. So she is another case, that she's been going around both inside and outside of her community, just taking advantage of others with the baby, just taking money from people, doing the most. And so when we did the expose on her and we did the show on her, people involved in that, the victims, right? This is where it's shocking and unbelievable, are told, no, you shouldn't go to Cayman Mall Road. You shouldn't air or dirty laundry. You shouldn't talk about this. And I oftentimes understand the psychology of this, especially when it comes to immigrant communities, because this happens a lot. When immigrant communities travel abroad, they tend to really stick together, and they have their own subcultures within any country. And they become very vulnerable, in fact, not just here in the Cayman Islands, but all over the world. They become very vulnerable for being victimized. And then within their own countries, within their own communities, they're told that you do nothing because otherwise you're going to make us look bad. And that is true of so many different, even in the US, the Chinese in New York, for example, in Chinatown. The reason why certain organizations, illegal organizations and otherwise, are able to take hold in those communities is because there's this inner fear of outsiders. There's this fear that outsiders will see your community a certain way if you share what is going on within your community. And I find that that's the exact same thing that's happening here with the Filipino community and probably other communities as well. Don't tell people what's going on with us sort of mentality. Well, as you guys know, Cayman Mall Road is here as a voice for all people, regardless of where you're from. And so we will, if Filipinos come to us, share exactly what is happening in their communities. If they want to provide us with evidence of how they are, then we will do so. And it is what it is. So Irene, and I'm going to think of the other young lady's name here in a second, have been up to the most in their own communities, and they've been doing a lot. And so Irene has, in my opinion, done sufficient things now that the police should be taking a very close look at her activities with a view to pressing charges. And the other thing I want to say is not only is there no shame in coming to a platform like CMR to get justice, all sorts of victims want to come on this program. Right now, we have a sexual assault victim. The men in her case were not convicted, but she has said at the end of the day, she also wants to come and share her story as a stark warning to all who may become victims. And this is the thing, folks. At the end of the day, anyone can be victimized. Anyone can be a victim. And when we protect the perpetrators, whether it's out of fear of, the unknown, or fear of making our communities look bad, it's one of the reasons that families don't report sexual abuse, because it's going to make my family look bad. I have siblings. I have a mom. I've had people who've been sexually abused by people who were close family friends or even family members. And they have said that as long as my mother is alive or my father's alive, I cannot share that abuse, simply because I don't want to hurt my family. I don't want, my mother to think that she's at fault for leaving me in the hands of some monster. On a very superficial level, folks, I understand the thinking. But what I also know from good experience is that that sort of thinking never resolves anything. So what that does is that creates an environment in which the perpetrator is allowed to continue to do what they do. And there will never be any justice served. So unless you speak up at some level, those individuals do not stop. I'm telling you, you will find that thieves don't stop stealing normally. They get more perhaps fine-tuned with their thievery. Child molesters do not one day wake up and say, oh my God, I'm ruining these young children's lives. Let me just stop. They become more skilled at what they do. They're smarter at picking victims, and they will continue. And in fact, the statistics prove that by the time someone is taken to court for child molestation, they have left a whole slew of victims. There's a whole trail of victims. So it's not often that they get caught on the first time, folks. And when you're a victim, and I was talking to a victim yesterday, and she was saying this to me, even in relation to Mr. Bush. She was saying, the people who've been victimized by him need to speak up. And I thought, yes, they do. But I also understand why they don't. Right? They don't speak up because of so many fears. And this person said to me, well, I was assaulted, not by Mr. Bush, let me be clear. And I spoke up. Her matter went to court and she got some justice. And she said, all victims need to be as strong as me. Well, that's easier said than done. Not all victims have the same strength. And this is why I'm always sympathetic towards victims. And even though sometimes I listen to them, I'm thinking, well, that's not logical for you to feel that way. You can't really question how someone feels, right? Their own life experiences have taught them that there are mean people out there, there are bad people out there who will take advantage of them. And so when people do speak up, when someone like a Maria, she says, I strongly agree, Miss Sandy, they're not supposed to favor or tolerate those people. When people find the strength to speak up, the last thing we need to do is to silence their voices. You know, the last thing we need to do is say, well, you should not be sharing your story on Cayman Mall Road. If it's going to bring some comfort, then share your story. If it is going to advise other people, then share your story. Because I want to make it very clear, I'm going to show you guys some evidence this morning that Irene has taken advantage of a lot of people. We have the receipts, folks. It's not just one person. It's not just two people. It is a whole slew of individuals. So we talked about before how her employer has turned a blind eye and basically said, well, this isn't my problem. The police oftentimes turn a blind eye when you go to just the regular beat officer and they say, this isn't my problem or our problem as a police force. This is a civil matter. Everyone is willing to pass the buck. And that is quite unfortunate. Because when that happens, that sends a very clear message to victims that in this community, you will not get justice because the police simply can't bother. They're too busy. And as I've said on this program before, yes, there are some cases that have a civil element to them, but there are also cases that are clearly fraud. You guys know what fraud means? Well, let's talk about it. When Irene issues a ticket, and she, again, you guys might remember, if you haven't seen the program, the previous programs on her, please go and have a look. When she issues a ticket for a travel itinerary that does not exist, a flight that doesn't exist, and she takes money from people on the basis of, I am booking you this flight to Manila, to the Philippines on such and such a date. This is the route that you're going. And that actually isn't available. As we've seen from the people who've come on our show, there was no flight that day from Cayman to the Philippines, from Cayman to Miami. There was no second leg to New York, and then the third leg to the Philippines, or there was actually, it wasn't Miami, it was Cayman to New York. And you know, Cayman Airways hasn't been flying to New York since the pandemic. So she was creating fake itineraries that do not exist. So I'm going to show you guys some of the evidence here that has been presented to us. Now, Irene has actually signed different statements, and I know it's hard to see this, so I'm going to see if, let me see if we can pull it up on another screen here. She has signed different statements basically saying that she has done these things and she's admitting to owing this money. Other people, this is a statement by Mr. Alan Lopez Flores. Let me do it this way. I'm going to do it a screen share because I think it might be a little bit better and more visible if we do it this way. Okay, because now I can at least increase the size. Hold on one second. Okay. So this says, I, Alan Lopez Flores, of legal age and a Filipino citizen residing at Godfrey Nixon Way, and likewise also a victim of Irene Garcia / global travel consultant, hereby depose and state that I'm here to explain the truth, nothing but the truth, and with all of my knowledge and belief, and no one has forced me to do so. Mr. Allen goes on to say that sometime in early December 2019, I met Irene Garcia at immigration here in Cayman. We were talking inside of the immigration office, and she introduced herself to me that she is working as a ticketing agent, particularly at Global Travel Consultant, which is located at Shedden Road. Coincidentally, my two friends and church mates' work permit was just approved by the Cayman Islands immigration at that time. I then mentioned to Irene that my two friends were coming to the Cayman Islands. She also discussed with me that if I buy the air ticket for my two friends from her agency, she can be of help for the speedy processing of their papers. In short, I was convinced more by what she said that she knew someone at the Philippine immigration who could assist and help them with their papers so that they could travel faster to the Cayman Islands. The processing fee was 140,000 pesos, which is the Filipino currency. Thinking of the many requirements and to get things sorted out easier and faster in relation to their travel to Cayman, that would be much helpful for my two friends. Believing and trusting everything that Irene Garcia told me, all true and correct, I did not hesitate or had second thoughts to pay the amount. I then deposited said amount to her bank account in the Philippines, and provides the bank account details here, on January the 3rd of 2020. And we have receipts of the deposits, folks. Likewise, she also explained to me that Irene can only book and issue their itinerary travel upon full payment of said air ticket. Therefore, on January the 6th, 2020, I went to her office, Global Travel Consultant, again located in Shedden Road, to give the full payment of the airline tickets breakdown as follows: $2,450 CI and $300 US. And then he says here, refer to the exhibits. For the individuals, both Philippines, assuming full trust and confidence to Irene Garcia and believing that what she was telling me all was true and correct. I felt so happy and excited at the time, expecting and hoping much that everything was put in order and no more problems regarding the coming of my two friends here to the Cayman Islands. I was so confident also that she booked them right away after full payment of their ticket. And she said, so it then went on and says, so sad and disgusting when Irene informed me that after a couple of weeks that she was not able to book them on January the 6th, but booked them on February the 20th. So imagine now what is happening here is the ticket money has been paid, right? But unfortunately for this gentleman, Irene, who was supposed to book it that day, did not do so. So she waited to book it. Now, you tell me something. How does this make any sense? Why on earth would you take money on January the 6th and not book the relevant, whether it's travel itinerary, whether you are purchasing something, that just doesn't make any sense. Your payment and delivery of goods should line up, right? So you don't go to the grocery store, pay for 5 bags of groceries, and walk out and not take your groceries with you. Unless there's some previous arrangement, an agreement where they say, okay, we're going to deliver your groceries for you at a later date. That's a different situation. Right? Now, that was not the agreement here. When Mr. Allen paid on January the 6th, he was expecting at that time, paid in full cash, and we're going to see the receipts here in a second. He was expecting for, let me just see if we can go to the next item. He was expecting for there to be a confirmation, a booking that would happen that exact same day. And folks, that didn't happen. So he said he was disappointed and disgusted when he found out that the booking didn't happen until February the 20th. Because then he says, for me, it would be impossible already for them to come to Cayman, considering the short period of time, questioning her why she changed their booking, when in fact she had complied with the full payment of the ticket. He goes on to say that I don't understand her logic and reason why she did not book them right now after we paid in full. Well, folks, the logic is she was scamming these poor people. They just didn't know it. All right, let's bring up another exhibit. So he has a very long statement here about what happened to him. Okay, let's continue. Oops. Then he talks about how he was trying to get his money back because, of course, as we've seen in other instances, it often turns out that nothing was booked at all. So then he speaks to her employer, who is Miss Paula Brown, who advises him to personally go to their office the following day, November 3rd. To my surprise, we discovered the following. No booking was made on February the 20th, as Irene earlier stated. So folks, not only did she not make a booking on the initial date, which would have been let me just try to see if I can pull this up here, which would have been January the 6th. When she said, oh, right, I couldn't do it January 6th, so I did it February the 20th, that was also a lie. No booking was made then either. In other words, he says, the booking she issued me was a fake one. Now, if this isn't fraud, this is not a civil matter, right? This has crossed over, in my opinion, again, as someone who sits in court every single day, and I see court cases, and I am privy to watching what judges say and how they interact. When you create a false document with the sole intent of defrauding people, separating them from their hard-earned money, that is the very definition of fraud. And there are a number of criminal charges that could flow from this. Everything from uttering a false document, which we're going to show you here in a second, to obtaining property by deception, theft. The DPP just needs to find out what the relevant charges should be. Because, folks, there are charges here that should be laid against Irene. She is a criminal, in my opinion. Let's look at the fake itinerary. British Airways departure from Dubai Airport and Dubai Arab Emirates, London Heathrow Airport, all the way to the Cayman Islands via Owen Roberts International Airport. Here's another one. All of these were fakes. Now, the man provides his receipt, because when you come to CMR, you got to show us your receipts, literal receipts. You got to bring your evidence, folks. He also has gone to the RCIPS and filed a complaint, and nothing has happened. Why? Why? People deserve to know, and there's many others. People deserve to know that the authorities will do the right thing and that they will step up to the plate and stop individuals such as Irene. All of the evidence is here. All of the false documents that she uttered are here. Why has nothing been done yet? Why have the police not arrested Irene? Why is she permitted? I think this is the one that I showed you guys already. Oh no, this is her sworn statement, where she admits to at least some of it. So this one says, I are Irene Garcia, of legal age, married and presently residing in Grand Cayman Islands, and likewise working at Global Travel Consultant, care of Paula Brown, hereby confirm and say that I can book the ticket upon full payment for two persons named Arthur so-and-so and Eric so-and-so, both Filipinos, for the Philippines who are coming to work here in Cayman. That we agreed with Mr. Alan Flores, residing at such and such an address off of Godfrey Nixon Way, who is the sponsor or guarantor of the two persons mentioned above, to pay, transact business with me as an agent of Global Travel Consultant in relation to the ticket and other related matters pertaining thereto. That I receive the following amounts of money. So she confirms everything, even the additional 140,000 pesos on January the 3rd, deposited to her account in the Philippines. And the amount in cash of 2,450 Cayman Islands dollars and an additional $300 dated January the 6th for full payment of airline tickets. So she got a total of $5,035 paid to me. That's what she says here. And this, my friends, is dated the 20th day of January, 2021. Good people, let me tell you, this is an open and shut criminal case. If ever there was a case that the DPP can win with one eye closed and one eye tied behind their backs, this is it. She has done this to multiple people in her community. Let me remind you of what Irene looks like. And while she's doing this, she's living her best life, going to Rum Point, enjoying drinks, and a good life, it seems, on the backbones of hard-working members of her own community. Now, those persons in the Filipino community who think that it's okay to cloak and hide people like her should really think twice. Because unfortunately, the people that she's going to victimize and scam, remember the chef that she got to quit his job and then promising him big time catering job, which never materialized? Not only is she hurting the people in her own community, but by extension, there is a fallout from that. She needs to be stopped. All scammers, regardless of who they are, need to be stopped. This type of behavior simply is not acceptable. When employers become aware of who they are, right? So whether it's this one or I'm trying to remember the name of the other young lady, the one with the sticky fingers, the salon worker, and the baby. Mary Jean. Yes, remember Mary Jean as well? So whether it's a Mary Jean who takes advantage of people, who steals from her coworkers, goes to the ATM machine, uses their card, takes out thousands of dollars, money disappears every time she's around, jewelry disappears when she's around. If people do not feel like in this community they can get any protection from the authorities, even from people within and the support of people in their own community, I think it is unfortunate and quite shocking that this behavior would be tolerated under the guise of, well, let's not have anyone else know what's going on. Don't inform CMR. Well, CMR is well informed, folks. We have the evidence. Just like we sat here and we talked about Garfield Rob going around victimizing people with his fake shutter business, taking their hard-earned money, doing nothing about it. When we got involved and reached out to the commissioner and said, sir, this is theft, this is fraud, all of a sudden, the call is out. If you have been a victim of Mr. Garfield Rob, please contact the RCIPS. We're going to do the exact same thing with Irene, folks. So let me tell you the kind of luck that Irene has. And you see now, this is where employers themselves are also at risk. Caymanian employers who have no clue what is going on. And because no one is speaking up, they are more likely to hire someone like an Irene, not knowing what is going on. So you think after all of this fallout, Miss Paula sent a letter to immigration informing them of what she knew in terms of what she considered theft and what was going on. You would think now that immigration would have said, whoa, this is the type of person that should be a persona non grata. They shouldn't be able to reside in the Cayman Islands. In fact, they shouldn't even be visiting here because in that short space of time, they are likely to defraud someone. But nope, immigration isn't doing that. Works isn't doing that. CBC, whoever's responsibility it now, isn't doing any of that because their argument probably is, well, she hasn't been convicted of anything. This is why, folks, you have got to, as a victim, follow the process, report these matters to the respective authorities to have something done about it. Because guess what? She already has a new job. Let me see here now if I can pull up where she's working. Because we got eyes and ears everywhere. She has already found a new job. Let me try to remember where this is. Yes. She has a work permit. Now working for a temporary work permit, working for Global Janitorial and Maid Services until the 9th of May, 2020. Wow. Now, I looked at this and I thought, who owns Global Janitorial and Maid Services? It's so strange that she would have another employer with almost the same name, Global Travel Consultant, and then Global Janitorial and Maid Services? Well, good folks, something stinks a little bit around here. So let me remind you of how incredibly easy it is for you to obtain information on people who have business licenses. So give me 1 second here. We are going to pull it up. This is how you do it, folks. So we go to DCI. That's Department of Commerce and Investment. They are responsible for issuing business licenses. And we're going to have a look at who owns this other company that she's now working for. So you can go here, folks, and search back quite a long time to see who owns a particular business. Now, if you open it up, there's a way to open it up without having to, I think this thing is, this thing here is always killing my little, it's just trying to kill my pop-up blocker here. Okay, let's see. Most of the time you can just open it up in the website without having to, let me just put it in Chrome, without having to open the PDF. So give me 1 second here, good folks. I'm going to wrap this up here in a second because we do have guests who are joining us on the program this morning. I just find it very suspect that she could find another employer who would have the same global name as her current employer. And I can't help but wonder if Miss Paula is still hiring Irene or still has her employed, just under a different company name. Right? Sounds awfully suspect to me. And this is where employers, you are responsible for these types of shenanigans. If you allow someone to remain in the Cayman Islands, knowing full well what they're capable of. So now we're looking for global janitorial and maid services. All right, let's see then. So we're in this window here. We can do a control F for find, global janitorial. So then we search, and it says here, there is one global janitorial, and it is a gentleman. Don't know if you guys can see this. It's still kind of small. By the name of Cleveland Frater. I don't know who Mr. Cleveland Frater is, but he is trading as Global Janitorial Services. So it looks like it isn't Miss Brown. What a coincidence. He has a number of different companies, including a construction company called C&H Construction. So he has a janitorial company license through August 2021. Vernice Baden Drive, that's Baden Town, folks. So this now is who she's working for, Mr. Cleveland Frater. And I'm willing to bet my bottom dollar that Mr. Cleveland Frater has no idea of the long history of things that Irene has been up to. Seriously. Huh. What a mess. All right. Hmm. Mr. Cleveland, you may want to be very, very careful, because someone who will defraud others in the manner in which she has done, falsifying documents, I would not trust them to go inside of a home or business of anybody, to be quite frank. Miss Shirley, thank you for weighing in. Shirley says, please get on this case and prosecute this RCIPS fraudster to the fullest extent of the law, then deport her. What more do you need than the proof available? You do not even have to work for this one. Exactly. It's all there. And the victims are willing, despite certain members of their community saying, oh no, don't do this, don't do that. They have still stepped forward. Liliana says, so Irene lives, married, and worked in the Cayman Islands, and so the money should be deposited to her account in the Philippines. That should raise some concerns. Cayman Police Department is a big embarrassment. Well, you know, it looks like what was happening there, Liliana, is she has a work permit to work as a travel agent, but she was claiming that she could also expedite their application from the other end, from the Philippines, to be able to get them here quicker. It appears to me that that is a separate service, really, which means that in fact, she is working outside the terms of her work permit when you think about the logistics and the legalities of that. And that is why it was paid to her account in the Philippines, because she's offering the service from that end. So Liliana, I agree with you that that should have raised some red flags, but probably not for the people doing business with her, because it could be like, oh, okay, I have people in the Philippines who will do this on my behalf, and they will expedite the applications for your friends. So is that carrying on business outside the terms of your work permit? That's a matter for immigration. So she's been here, as Maria says, for over a year on a work permit. Now she has a temporary as a cleaner. Good morning to Quincy. Yes, I believe it's time that the police took a very close look at what she's doing. Not just immigration, the police need to intervene. Oh, I agree, Darlene. I am sure Mr. Cleveland has no clue what Irene has been up to. And this is another reason why people, when people tell you, oh, don't speak up, you know, don't file a report, don't do this, don't do that, that is why you are obligated to do so. Because these people will continue. Now she has access to people's homes. How much are businesses? How much more intimate and private can you get than allowing someone in your business space or in your personal home as a cleaner? That should be a company or individuals that you trust. And it is obvious that Miss Irene has proven herself to be untrustworthy. I don't know how she found Mr. Cleveland. And quite frankly, with the letter that would have been placed on her immigration file from her previous employer, Ms. Paula, I do not know how immigration approved even a temporary. Let's be very frank and honest here. But you see now a lot of these immigration processes have been placed under the umbrella of they're just administrative. So an administrator is just looking at the application and processing it. It's no longer going before a board for board members with multiple sets of eyes to look at this situation and say, hold on, what is actually happening here? So Valdine says she's not Cayman, and that's why nothing is happening. Well, I don't know, but I can tell you something needs to be done, and in a hurry. This is absolutely wrong. Elizabeth, I don't know where she's getting references from, or even if these employers are requesting references, because a lot of employers do not. This is a very sad case, folks. Irene, your days are numbered in the Cayman Islands. I personally will be reaching out to the commissioner today. I will not allow the day to pass without once again providing him with evidence of Miss Irene's behavior and suggesting that he does the exact same thing that he did with Mr. Garfield. Mount an investigation. Financial crime needs to get involved. And financial crime needs to put out a public statement looking for other victims of Miss Irene, because I can assure you that they exist. If we've had 3 or 4 people come to us, I bet that's the minority. There are no telling how many people she did this to under the guise of booking a ticket for them, creating fake travel itineraries. What else is fake about her? Maybe she got a fake clearance certificate to come to the Cayman Islands as well. Who knows? All right, folks. So we do have coming up on the program today Mr. Mario Ebanks. Then we've got Wayne Panton and Alric Lindsay. We welcome them to the program. Let us start off with Mr. Mario. Let's see if he's ready. So I don't see you backstage, my dear. So I'm not sure where you're at backstage, but it doesn't show you here. So give me 1 second. Let me try to figure out what is going on with Mr. Mario. So Mr. Mario was on the program. By the way, I need to talk about, while we're getting Mr. Mario sorted out, I do need to talk about the meeting last night in Red Bay. So folks, you know, I covered the meeting. You saw it streaming live. And quite frankly, it was a fabulous meeting. Actually, someone just said, "Good morning, Sandy. Great meeting and video coverage at Harbor House Marina last night." It was a good meeting. And can I tell you that if I were Alden McLaughlin, after seeing the hundreds of people that were in attendance there last night, they put out at least 250 chairs. The chairs were largely filled. And there were people who will stay in their cars. There are people who don't sit in a chair. They go sit on the back of a truck. I would be worried if I were Alden McLaughlin. Because I tell you in no uncertain terms, for a first political meeting, that was an awesome turnout and an awesome audience. I am hard pressed to recall, thinking back politically now, you know, I've been involved in politics for a long time, going back to 1996, 97. I would be hard pressed to recall a first meeting for someone who hasn't been involved in the world of politics, none at all, to have a first meeting that was that successful with that many people in attendance. And they're not part of a party. Because see, when you're part of a party, you expect, you know, because this is what they do. They bus people in from all over to make the numbers look good. That's what the PPM does. And back in the day, when the UDP, when they were anybody, that's what they did as well. Sammy, congratulations. Well done. I was impressed. He had a very good turnout. There are clearly a lot of people who are interested in hearing what Sammy has to say. And they showed up in droves. So, wow. Like I said, everyone sees this as the newcomer going up against Goliath, who's been in politics forever. It's going to be so difficult for Sammy to beat Alden. But I can tell you what, based on the turnout last night, the people are there, his supporters are there, and people want change. That much was obvious. And people believe that Sammy is the right man for the job. The support was overwhelming. And another thing that we gauge the success of political meetings by is how many other people in the political arena come out to support and observe and stuff as well. They can see the numbers for themselves. So, folks, we had Chris Saunders, who was on stage. He's known Sammy for some time, so he was sort of a reference for Sammy. We had Johan Moxham, who's a newcomer to the political arena. We had seasoned individuals. Alva Saku was there. We had Kenneth Bryan from Georgetown Central there. And so this isn't me sitting here just telling you the numbers were good. Everybody could see the numbers for themselves. So Shirley says Sammy gives us all hope, not just the voters in Red Bay. And I must say, given the number of people that came out from other districts as well, because Sammy, now remember, is a West Bayer. He's from West Bay South. They came out in droves to support him as well. Absolutely amazing. Let us remember that Alden McLaughlin in the world of politics has never really been all of that popular. Like when there were 4 elected members, he was always coming in almost at the end. And someone was sharing last night, and I'd never heard this story before, but they said, do you remember back in 2000, I think it was 13, Alden actually thought that he had lost his seat in Georgetown. And that would have been the last time that they had where you could vote for more than one person. And he was crying on the shoulders of Kurt Tibbetts at the time, thinking that he had lost. Well, he barely got in by the, skin of his teeth sort of thing. So, Sammy, bring it home. Because the only real way for people to affect change is if you remove the people who continue to, through whatever skills they have, pull people together to form a party. Alden will pull anybody in so that the PPM can lead a party. Even if the PPM only gets 4 or 5 people in, he will go out there and find the remainder of weaklings who will join up with him, including the CDP members, to have another unity government. If you want to stop that, which a lot of you have expressed that you do, I maintain that the most important way to do that is to get rid of Alden McLaughlin. Make the leadership of the PPM ineffective. Alden, Roy, Joey, Barbara, David, take out as many of them as you can. El Rey says, excellent. We definitely need new blood. So speaking of new blood, we've got Mario here joining us. Good morning to you, Mario. How are you?
Good morning, Sandra. How are you doing today?
Wonderful, wonderful. Good to see you again.
Pleasant. Good morning to all your audience, your viewers, listeners in Cayman and around the world. I am Mario Ebanks, a candidate for West Bay West. I am an 8th generation Caymanian with my great-grandparents, grandparents, and parents from West Bay, different parts of West Bay. I am your community leader, your good shepherd, your humble servant, and ready to serve you, not just in West Bay West, but in West Bay in general, and Grand Cayman and the Cayman Islands in particular as well. I want to give a little message again this morning to the Latin community. Y buenos días, y familia, y amigos, y amigas en la isla, Cuba, y todos Latinos en Cayman. Bendiciones. En West Bay West, votar Mario Ebanks y ningún otro. Este tiempo es tuyos. Sandro, when we spoke the last time on Tuesday, where I introduced myself, or reintroduced myself, I should say, I hope, without sounding arrogant. I was talking about my history, my qualifications, my community service. I talked a bit about growing up in West Bay, and I missed part of that story, in that there's a lot of that story that I would take a long time to talk about because it's some good stuff. But when we were, I talked about we rented that house, and we returned from the Isle of Pines, and we had to start life again from scratch. We rented my parents rented a number of houses throughout West Bay, and the last one was from Mr. Spurgeon Ebanks, who had a house where Foster's Republics in West Bay is now, and which was developed by his son-in-law, Mr. Louis Parsons, and Miss Marley, and then later on sold to the Foster family and expanded. But my father, Philip Wesley Ebanks of blessed memory, he was a master carpenter, and so every day he got home from work, whether it's a public works or whether he was that time doing his own carpentry and cabinetry and building, and he would take us all, 5 boys, like Moses taking the children through the promised land, and we'd walk a trail from where is now with Panton Drive. Used to be a little trail, and he used to go through, and parts of that trail was just a cow pasture trail. So when it rained, we had to walk through water, and we walk every evening after work. The 5 of us behind him, and we'd go up to a property that he bought in Mount Pleasant to build our house. And we did that for, it seemed a long time, but probably two years or so. And in that walk, we walked through parts of West Bay that people may not know or remember or know about. A place called Hydesville, where there's a substation there now, and Wilderfarton Drive. And that area used to be called, I give it the proper name, Noteet Town, but we used to call it Noteet Town. And wonderful people live there, and the Hydes and others, wonderful friends of ours. We walked all the way up through the bush and the grass piece, and we got to Mount Pleasant. And we went to the place that when Father was building our house in Mount Pleasant, which is now Mount Close. But then it used to be called Knife and Fork. So I walked on the bay through Noteet Town and to Knife and Fork. And as I say, we left the house that Mr. Spurgeon Ebanks rented to us. He was a wonderful man. He was a vestryman, a business person in West Bay. But it was also during that time, we also walked through Elizabeth Street. And Elizabeth Street is where, in later years, I met good friends, including Mr. Troy Leacock, who is a outstanding visionary young man, a leader, businessman, and someone who I was happy that he endorsed me on Monday on nomination day, or he nominated me. And I was listening to Mr. McKeever Bush and his team the other night at their public meeting. He took a swing at Mr. Troy Leacock concerning taxation. And he talked about the Facebook, and he talked about we wanted to bring in tax and tax on the rich and whatnot. But I want to remind Mr. McKeever Bush that he's running against Mario Ebanks. He's not running against Troy Leacock. If he wants to attack anyone, attack me, attack my record, my public record, and attack anything that he can defend, and also be reminded that there will also be a counterattack. But he's running against Mario Ebanks. So if Troy Leacock puts something on his website that's his personal opinion, Mr. McKeever Bush cannot put that on my shoulders. But so I hope that sets that clear. I am my agenda is not yet published in full, and it does not include anything about taxation. Let's get that straight. But I also mentioned in my opening about my history and some of the walks in West Bay and Mr. Spurgeon Ebanks. Mr. Spurgeon Ebanks, those of you who don't know, was an upstanding citizen, statesman, a vestryman, a member of the parliament, a businessman in West Bay, good man. He was one of the first people that Mr. McKeever Bush slapped down, physically assaulted, slapped him down into the ground at, of all places, a church meeting at the Presbyterian Church right there near Centennial in West Bay. The church is still standing. Unfortunately, Mr. Spurgeon Ebanks, a good man, was not left standing that day. He's now gone on to Gloryland. May his memory be blessed, and may you be reminded of the kind of person that my opponent, McKeever Bush, is. His assault history has not started in 2020. It started long before that time. People have been coming to me and telling me things, not just since I declared, but over the years. I know things as well. I work with Mr. McKeever, and we spent time together, good wholesome time. But I know about him as well. People have been telling me things. I am not going to go into the gutter in this campaign. I'm not going to start now. But he talks about people living in glass houses. He better be worried about himself, because he lives in a glass house that can be shattered from so many directions. But this campaign is about issues, solutions, and facts, not about innuendo, mud, assaults, and dirt. But I wanted to warn him, stay away from my friends, stay away from my family. If you want to debate the record, debate Mario Ebanks, not Troy Leacock or anybody else.
It's unfortunate, Mario, but in the world of politics, nothing surprises me for sure. And in fact, I would have expected this from Mr. Bush, because that's just how he plays. That's how he rolls, as these young people say. And when I first heard that you were running for public office, I thought to myself, I think Mario's too nice to take on McKeever, because we know the mudslinging that would be coming. And unfortunately, the voters play into that a lot of times, and that gets them all riled up at the polls. And, he's able to stand behind a podium and say all sorts of things about people without any recourse or, repercussions for his behavior. So I am not surprised that it has already begun. In fact, he probably is a little bit slow on the get up this year, being at election time.
People have said to me,
it's sad. It is sad.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandra. People have said to me that they don't want me to go to that level. I didn't do it when I ran in 2000 and 2005. I'm not going there, but I am going to defend myself. I'm going to defend my record. And anything that he throws that is not true, he has to prove it. And he also runs the risk of facing some serious retaliation of some mud, because I'm not afraid to throw mud, but I would prefer not to. Yes. And the other day, someone came into my neighborhood here in Coral Gables, Northwest Point, and this lady, a wonderful lady, and I got home. My wife and I went to a lunch meeting. We got home, and there was a little note stuck on our door, and it says, "Mario, praying for you," and it's left the person's name. Look, all those people who are praying for me, who are rooting for me, must be reassured. I'm not going to let them down during the election, and when elected on the 14th of April, I will not let them down then. I have a lighthouse that I always be guided through life by, and that lighthouse, if it wasn't for that lighthouse, I would be somewhere else, but I'm not going to forget the light that beams across the darkness from that lighthouse. Sandra, if I know you have questions and comments, and I really appreciate that. What I want to just do today, just for the next few minutes, is just touch upon just some of my agenda items which we are working on as we develop our campaign and our manifesto. And one of the things that we want to do, first of all, one of the first priorities for the district is to look at a hurricane shelter and a multi-purpose community center. West Bay is one of the largest districts, and there's been groundbreaking, there's been talk, there's been material dumped into places for civic centers, and nothing has happened. And 36 years, Mr. Bush has been our representative, and West Bay don't have a place that we can call a proper hurricane shelter. And if I am elected, one of the priorities in the first 100 days, as they say, would be to put in motion a plan to do a proper hurricane shelter and multipurpose civic center in the district. It might not necessarily be West Bay West, but it'll be in the district for all constituencies and constituents to have access as they need it. Also, a mental health facility. West Bay has a number of people with mental health issues, and we're going to focus on that. And district councils. District council is one of our other priority areas. Sandra, one of the things that I am passionate about also is limited term for parliamentarians and members of parliament, where I am going to propose, if elected, that the constitution be amended in a number of specific areas. One of those would be to create limited terms so that a parliamentarian can only serve for no more than 20 years continuously. Of course, they can take a break and come back, but no more than 20 years continuously. And within that 20 years, no more than 2 terms or 8 years, as currently is, they can serve as premier. Within that, constitutional reform as well, and augmented by a proper code of conduct, will be a recall provision where the citizens, the voters, can recall people, parliamentarians who have gone astray, who have conducted misconduct, as was the case with Mr. McKeever, who was charged, pleaded guilty, and sentenced for the assault that took place in 2020, but of course remained a member of the House, remained a speaker, and was enabled by the current premier, his good friend, Mr. Alden McLaughlin, and others. And we're going to deal with those things. We're also going to look at programs for families, communities, and parents. We're going to empower families and communities by implementing a Family and Community Empowerment Act, or law. And we'll talk more about that on the campaign trail and in the manifesto. We have a minimum wage in this country, and I know it well because I was a director of labor and pensions during the time when that minimum wage came in. I was not on the minimum wage advisory committee. I had no vote. I was just basically an advisor. Minimum wage was set at $6 per hour, CI. That is too low, but we have to review it. We have to see what the economic factors indicate, and we also have to put in place a living wage, and something obviously which is scientifically and mathematically and economically supported as well. I've also been passionate over many years, from time before I went to university in the mid 80s, about the development, training, and succession planning of Caymanians. That's why I was a founding member and the second president of the Overseas Students Association when I returned from university in 1986. So I'm going to make that one of my priorities, one of my crowning glories, one of my passions, to make sure that Caymanians and young Caymanians get access to training at college here or overseas. They have proper career development plans, they get proper job placement, and they reach their full potential by upward mobility and succession planning in the workplace. I also believe, and I think this is shared by many other, several other candidates on the independent side anyway, for a proper long-term development plan for these islands, a plan that covers and reviews all aspects, a very holistic plan, dealing with the economy, culture, heritage, society, marine and land-based environment, carrying capacity, infrastructure, all of those factors, all of those spokes in the wheel. And Mr. Troy Leacock talks a lot about that himself. And that's why I like him, because he talks about the future and not about the past. And transportation strategies, West Bay has it well compared to the other part of the island, but we still we're still not out of the woods, because West Bay is very popular, and because of traffic and because of West Bay being very beautiful as well, people are moving here. And but we have to look at transportation and traffic, and we'll have to look at it throughout the whole island. And building roads and expensive roads where we don't have land is not the solution. We have to look at other strategies. So other strategies in terms of staggered time, flex time, public transportation, looking at people, how reckless and fast they drive on the roads, and make sure that we have proper enforcement and fines. So we're going to do a host of transportation management strategies, not necessarily all spending and roads and destruction of land, but also strategies that are non-monetary, but also are very effective. We're also going to look at the cost of living. One of the biggest factors in the cost of living is the CUC electricity bills. And much of that is driven by the cost of fuel, the fuel factor. If you look at your CUC bill, you'll see the fuel factor on those bills, and that's a big part of the bill. Mm-hmm. But also there's green technologies, there's alternative energy. And we're going to look at that. And there's a lot of opportunities. There's people out there who are doing this now, and it can help the environment, it can help the cost of living, and it can help people make some money back from their excess that they produce in solar, for example. But also it can reduce the carbon footprint and also help the environment. So those areas we're gonna touch on. And safety and law and order, again, big items on my agenda. So our committee, our people are working on these things, and I'm getting good feedback. And very soon we will be unveiling our manifesto. But I have in my statement last week, we outlined some summary points of that. I give away.
All right, my dear. Thank you so much. Miss Ethel says, Mario, my guy, yes. Daisy says, buenos dias. Tracy says, Mac, if you have to put someone down to make yourself look good, tells a lot about your character. Focus on what you can do for the people and less on slandering others. Well, that might be challenging for him. Miss Shirley says, Mario also gives us hope along with several others. Thank you. Tracy says, Mario, don't focus on the fight with giants. Rise above their foolish games and lead by example by ignoring their behavior and focus on your path for the people. Some sage advice there from good Tracy. You are better than politics and clearly can lead. And by example of true leadership, you got this. So Troy is here. Good morning, Troy. And Troy, make sure that he clarifies that any statement that he makes is his opinion and not behalf of Mario or any other candidate. But I can once again emphasize that some of the burden, of our duty and fees, aka tax, needs to be shifted from the vulnerable to the wealthy. So, Mario, thank you so much for making those introductory remarks this morning. Can you tell us a little bit more? We have been talking. Now, I know you're a little bit of a latecomer to CMR in terms of joining us as a guest. I don't know if you even had time to listen previously, to be honest, but we have been talking about the cost of living here in the program with other candidates. So we have some candidates who come on every single week, and they have opened themselves up to talking about different discussions. So last week and the week before, the focus actually was on the cost of living. So I'd like to give you an opportunity now. I know you won't necessarily be here every week with us like others, but I want to give you an opportunity to talk specifically about that topic, the cost of living. You mentioned one driving factor, which is the fuel factor and the CUC bills. But what else is driving up the cost of living, and what are some of your specific solutions to try to address those concerns?
One of the important things to keep in mind about cost is driven by supply and demand. There's a X and Y axis in that, and you have costs and supply is what drive prices. I am also keen to look at wages and the minimum wage, because if we can help people earn higher income, be more employable, that will also help them to be able to survive. But as I said to you as well, it's not just a supply-driven approach. It's not a supply-side economics. This is also a demand side. But fuel costs in this country, and you know, there are people in this island who have been fighting and protesting and doing petitions about the cost of fuel into these islands, which obviously affects transportation, our daily lives, and it affects CUC. CUC is burning diesel in their generators, and it's clean, it's good for the environment, but it's also not good, it's better for the environment than heavy fuels, but it's still a problem. But it's also very expensive. And because of that, CUC has their generators are probably better maintained and have a longer lifespan because of the fuel that they use. Look at alternatives, you know, blended fuel, for example, and also look at green technologies, solar, wind, and the like. But it's not just CUC. It have to be other people in the country, individuals and businesses that also have the opportunity to look at energy, because energy drives everything, Sandra. If your electricity bill and the cost of transportation, stuff being delivered, and all that is high, that's going to be passed on to the consumer. Now, one of the things that we have to be careful with is when we look at cost of living, you got to realize that you can't just have price control. With price control comes wage control. So wage and price controls are two very, very complicated issues. So my plan would be to look at the major cost factors, look at increasing people's incomes, and also, to be frank with you, looking at people's personal finances and budgeting. We have to all realize that we have to live within our means, right? We can't expect to have all of the gadgets, all of the jewelry, all of the beautiful nails and hair and all that, right? If we can't afford it, we have to live by our means. Sometimes we have to make do and not have all of our wants fulfilled, but all of our needs. But at the same time, $6 an hour cannot cut it. But I want to make sure you understand that $6 an hour doesn't mean that people have to be paid that. That's the minimum per hour. And so if somebody is making $7 and minimum wage, I know when I was director, people were making more than $6 and minimum wage came in and they tried to drop their wage. And I said, no, hold on, you can't do that. Your employment contract under section 6.3, I believe, of the labor law, 6 subsection 3, you can't just amend somebody's terms of conditions without putting an agreement in place, and that person has to agree to it. So minimum wage is something you've got to look at, but cost of fuel, CUC's cost and what they use for their generation, and also green technologies to help the environment, but also bring down costs.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. Ms. Sue says praying somebody needs to do this with the duties. It's so high. Need to be rich in order to be able to pay it. And Anne says, Mario, the island is anxiously waiting for your win. What about as it relates to the cost of living, Mario? One of the costs that really is quite onerous for families in particular is the cost of health insurance. Do you have any thoughts on how that can be addressed?
I do. I've had that for years. As a matter of fact, before the national pension legislation was enacted in the late 90s, we were also working on a health insurance plan. And that was before my time. And I was working with elected ministers, including some who are in the House now, on that scheme. But that scheme culminated in the plan that we have now. But that plan, which is basically run by Cineco, is really not sufficient, because what I want to do is to do a holistic health insurance plan that provides coverage for people while they are working, but they would also contribute into a sinking fund that the employer and employer contributes to within the health insurance scheme that they're in, so that when they retire, they don't have to go out and after the first 30 or 90 days, they don't have any health insurance, and that's when their health claims increase, and their health issue would normally increase, and they can end up being bankrupt in very short order. So my plan would be, and I talk about this more in my manifesto and public meetings and elsewhere, that you have a plan where people come in. It's almost like it's not a government operated plan. My proposal that we would want to do would be where government sets the framework, and it, as is the case with the pension, government will then approve, say, two providers who provide a health insurance coverage based on a suite of benefits and also reasonable cost. And those two providers can compete for the market. But the concept would be that all employees and employers join one of those two plans, and they would contribute. And if you, for example, if you retire after 10 years with that company, you would not necessarily get the full coverage that you, once you retire. You would have to still pay a portion, perhaps, but it would be a sufficient amount in your health insurance plan. So it'd be like a national plan, but not run by the country, by the state or by the government. If you're there for 20 years, you get more. If you're there for 30 years, you get full coverage. The same kind of concept as is the case for pension, but the more you pay in, the more covered health insurance that you'll have once you retire. So I'm all for a national health insurance program that is administered by government in terms of the law, and the tone is set and enforced by government, but not operated by government. Now, maybe Cineco would be one of the providers that compete for the business, but they would not be the only provider. And so that's the plan that I am in favor of. And when I was a councillor for the Chamber of Commerce, as I said to you on Tuesday, I was the first Caymanian manager of the Chamber of Commerce from 1988 to 1991. And it was a 2-year term, and it went to 3 years plus, and then I had enough because it was a lot of work and not too much for one person. But anyway, I went back a couple of times, once as a councillor and also as a volunteer for the Chamber. And then my last stint as a Chamber councillor was 2018 until January 2020, last year. And one of my things that I pushed for every month at the council meetings, I was only a councillor, I wasn't in the executive, was the same thing of national health insurance program. I just kept fighting every month and got nowhere. But if I am elected, I will push and succeed with the help of the community, the business community, other stakeholders, and with my fellow parliamentarians to bring in place within 1 year a workable, affordable, holistic, and effective national health insurance program that benefits employees, retirees, the elderly, and the indigent, everybody who needs it.
Thank you very much for that.
More details to come. Interesting.
Very good. Miss Morna says that there needs to be a rental board too, Mr. Mario. It's outrageous. Trust me, and good luck. So what are your thoughts on a rental board? I know we're running out of time here, but give us some of your thoughts, please, on a rental board, which normally comes with rent control. How do you feel about that?
I believe, and I don't have the details on this in front of me, but I believe there was a landlords and tenants law that was passed during the time that Mr. Kurt Tibbetts was the Minister for Housing. And as I said to you, also part of my agenda for action is access to affordable housing and land for Caymanians to be able to purchase and develop those home sites. A rental board, I think, is a great idea, and that can certainly be accommodated within the landlords and tenants legislation that is in place. The problem that we have, is that government passes laws, but when you come to enforcing and setting up the regulations and the operational structure for all these things to make it work, it just doesn't get done. So you have laws in the books, but you don't have the apparatus to see them through. But the other thing that can be done about rental accommodation and enforcement, under the immigration, and this is for expatriates now, but for people who come into work, they have to, Cayman Islands to work, they have to do an accommodation form as part of their application process. And that tells you where they're going to live, their address, how many people are going to be in that residence, blah, blah. But nobody enforces it. And if you go to see where those people put on that form that they're going to be living compared to where they are living, you'll see a vast difference. But for Caymanians, again, we have to have in place the teeth in the landlords and tenants legislation to ensure that there's proper standards and that the tenants, those who are renting, are not abused, evicted, or given bullying tactics by some of the landlords. And some of those landlords are people from other countries that punish their own people when they come here to work and to have to get rental accommodation. Some are own Caymanians too, but a lot of them are bad people, bad players that do these things. And I want to make sure that they understand that if Mario Ebanks is elected in West Bay West and is a parliamentarian, that those days are over for those kinds of practices.
Mr. Mario, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We appreciate it. Lots more comments coming in for you. But we do have Mr. Wayne Panton who's waiting for us in the wings. So we're going to be ears a little bit. So it was good hearing from you again this morning.
I wonder if I could just say one last comment. I know Wayne would give me 30 seconds if I could.
Yep.
Sandra, I know you were also a dog lover. And
yes.
and I see you. I saw something on your website the other day. It brought tears to my eyes because last November 21st, we lost one of our best friends, my little Rocky Marciano Ebanks, little Shih Tzu, and wonderful guy. When I ran in 2005 and didn't get elected, the days after that were very difficult indeed. I didn't want to get out of bed. You felt so disappointed. You felt so downtrodden. And every morning, my little Rocky used to come by the bedside and scratch at the bedside and make little noises. You want to go, you want to play, you want to go out. And so every morning for about a week or two, definitely the first 3 days or so, 3-4 days, he was there getting me out of bed because I didn't want to get out of bed. And he got me out. We went walking. We had fun, and I was able to rebound from that loss in 2005. But Rocky is no longer with us. He's now in doggy heaven. But I know when I win on April the 14th, Rocky will be up there in doggy heaven, and I think he'll be jumping up again and says, "My papa did it. My papa did it." Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Mario. I really appreciate that. Some heartfelt comments there. Mario, please enjoy the rest of your day. Have a safe weekend. Keep us updated on how things are going on the campaign trail so that we can definitely update our viewers as well.
Thank you very much. I'll see you soon.
All right, thank you so much. So yeah, folks, I am an animal lover, and you guys know that we tragically lost our little Coco at the end of November of this year, in circumstances that no one should have to lose a dog. And I've got a girlfriend. Many of you know her as Miss Izzy. She does a lot of performing and singing around the island. And during the busy campaign season, she's been helping me out a little bit with my daughter because we don't have a full-time helper or nanny. We've never really felt like we've needed one. We've always wanted to be very, very hands-on as parents. But right now we need a little bit of help with like pickup times in the afternoons and so on. So she picks up Gianna and spends a little bit of time with her in the garden some evenings. And she actually said to me yesterday, she said, every single day, Gianna talks about Coco, every single day. And it's almost like she's reliving in her head the parts of the attack that she saw, because she didn't really see the full thing. We were able to get her out of the way. But we have to recognize that a situation like that would have been traumatic for a 4-year-old. It was it was traumatic for me, and I'm in my 40s, right? To witness my beloved Coco being attacked so viciously, and I have a much fuller comprehension, folks, of what transpired. Gianna doesn't, but she knows that there were, she says there were bad dogs that dragged her down the road, and she has some understanding of what happened. She obviously knows that Coco isn't coming back. I remember when we told her a couple days afterwards that Coco had died, she didn't even really, she kind of understands death, but not fully. So the first thing she did when we said, that Coco has died, she just burst out crying, which is a natural response. But then she was like, well, when is she coming back from the vet? And we were like, no, death is pretty final. You don't come back from that. So since then, she's obviously gotten used to the concept that Coco isn't coming back. And you can see her little brain trying to process, like, are we going to get another dog? Then she'll say, well, when we get another dog, can they use Coco's bed? And I said, no, we'll get the new dog everything, like brand new, all their own toys. And she's like, oh, okay. So what she's done, Miss Izzy was actually saying to me just yesterday, in fact, that she noticed that not only does she talk about her every single day, but she also she's sort of adopted the dogs next door. So Izzy says, by the way, Gigi talks about Coco almost every single day. And like I said, part of it is kind of going over in her head, like what happened, right? So we don't feel that we should be telling her not to talk about it. I think that's how she's coping. And it's important for children to know that they can tell you anything. As parents, we grew up very, very differently. We grew up, not always being open with our emotions or feelings. And sometimes adults telling us, in fact, that you can't share certain things, you can't say certain things because they thought it was inappropriate or you're a child, so don't speak until you're spoken to. And I think by now, most of us have recognized that that isn't the way to raise emotionally balanced children. You have to give them an opportunity to speak and to express themselves. So it's been very, very challenging for me because she does talk about it a lot. And, as an adult, part of my coping mechanism is maybe not to talk about it as much, to kind of put it in the back of my mind, although there are reminders every day of the fact that Coco isn't here any longer. Even we have a cleaning lady that comes once a week. She's like, oh, every time I open the door, I was so used to being greeted by Coco, and that is no longer here. So I sympathize with Mario for the loss of his dog. I think any loss of a beloved pet is very, very tragic. We will eventually get another dog because it's impossible for you to have loved a pet once in your life and not open your heart again to loving another pet. It's just, no matter how. I remember when I lost my two dogs, Oscar and Rupert, I said I would never get dogs again because this is too hard. To lose an animal is just like losing a family member. And I said, you know what, I'm never going to get, and you cannot help yourself. It's just part of life. And so part of the life cycle is also teaching our children, even at the age of 4, that loss is part of life. We will lose people that we care about or things that we care about and that we love. And, we have to cope. So now Gianna has adopted the dogs next door. There's 2 other dogs on the other side that are very, very nice. And somehow she's managed to rename the neighbor's dogs. So she calls them very different things. And a big shout out to my neighbor, Miss Maureen, who's very tolerant of Gigi, going to the fence and wanting to offer her dog snacks. So poor Miss Izzy had to buy a bag of dog snacks because Gigi insisted that we needed to treat these dogs very nicely and get them some doggy treats and so on. And of course, we don't really do things like that without asking the permission of the dog's actual owners. So she's renamed them, I think, Chloe and Lucky or something. I don't even know where she got those names from. But let's bring Wayne Panton into the discussion. And we do have Alric Lindsay, who's also waiting to join us. These days, we're extremely busy here on Cayman Mall Road. Wayne, good morning. And thank you so much for the program today.
Good morning, Sandra. Pleasure to be here with you again and to be able to talk with you and interact with your listeners and your viewers.
Yes. So we actually did a conversations with segment, speaking of dog lovers, with Wayne last week, and I was surprised to see that Wayne has 5 dogs.
Yeah.
Wow. So he's got a couple that we didn't get to meet, but we did get to meet 2 beautiful rescue dogs, Wayne, that, oh my gosh, they're so incredibly beautiful, 2 pit bulls. And then he's got, what was the other little dog's name again? The one who was a little bit rude at times?
Banjo.
Banjo. Yes, Banjo's got quite the personality.
Yeah.
So Wayne, when we did the conversations with segment with you, I've got to tell you, even up until last night, someone said to me at family's meeting that they saw that segment with you. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. There we go. That they saw that segment with you, and they really, although they know you, they really were touched by getting to get a little bit of a more personable insight into who you are, what your experiences have been kind of growing up, and even how you got your start in the legal profession. You know, a lot of people kind of thought, how did that happen? Did Wayne grow up in a privileged environment where he had, you know, his entire life mapped out and planned out for him? And I thought it was so interesting to learn from Wayne that, in fact, he initially wasn't interested in law at all. He was more of a science person.
Still am, but but I grew to love the law, as I said, you know. So
yeah, you've learned to love another subject, so to speak.
I think many of us are born with lots of different capabilities and potential interests, and mine have always been a broad sort of spectrum, but very much skewed on the science side. But I grew to love the law, and it's something that I've had a long career there. I still love it. I still miss it. I miss the people more than anything else. But I certainly miss management challenges and that sort of thing, and I miss the practice of law. I miss engagement with international clients and selling Cayman, selling the services of Cayman as a preeminent financial services jurisdiction in the world, you know, not just in the Caribbean, not just regional, but in the world.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. The other interesting thing, which I shouldn't really be surprised at, because you've kind of become known as the environmentalist. The last time you were in the LA, you were in fact one of the only ministers of cabinet at that time in part of the PPM government that was really pushing environmental protection. So I shouldn't be surprised to see that you have a lot of foliage in your own backyard. You know a lot about your trees, your environment. You seem to know a bit about the ocean. Why is the environment so important for you personally?
Because I think it's central to our existence. If you take it to the highest level, you know, without a strong natural environment, we can't exist on this planet. That's the bottom line. You know, without trees that take in carbon dioxide and convert that carbon dioxide into energy and food for themselves, and then at night they emit oxygen back into the atmosphere. Without that process going on, we can't live. What planet do we have? We have no life. The atmosphere consists of about 20% oxygen. You know, if that starts dropping because, you know, we're clearing trees all over the planet, and we all know that we have had loads of deforestation over the years. You know, the Amazon basin, for example, is referred to as the lungs of the planet, and that's because of the amount of, you know, carbon dioxide and carbon related products that they can absorb, that the trees and the rainforest there can absorb, and then the amount of oxygen that is emitted at night as a part of their natural life cycle process, you know. So they call it, just generally referred to it as breathing, not the same kind of breathing that we do, but we're the beneficiaries, and we've seen over the last few years, in the last year or two in particular, this very significant increase in the amount of burning and clearing and stuff that's going on there. And that, to me, that's a threat. It mightn't be a threat to me, it mightn't be a threat to you, it mightn't be a threat to my son, but I can assure you that I care about more than just them. I care about people in the future and Caymanians in the future. And if we don't have a safe environment, and a productive environment, a natural environment which continues with these natural processes, we can't live on this planet. You know, it substantially degrades our quality of life. And I mean, the quality of life today will be significantly degraded if we're clearing everything around and losing our landmarks and losing, you know, what makes it feel like Cayman to us, what we identify as a part of our psyche, as a part of our soul as Caymanians. So there's a range of things from the sea, from lobsters and conchs, all the way up to issues like that are truly systemic and global, like the ability of the planet to maintain a process which creates or makes life possible, you know. And I hear people sometimes with the notion that land in and of itself, in other words, naturally vegetated land in and of itself, has no intrinsic value. But I beg to differ. It has every value to us in the world, because it is what contributes to our life. It contributes to our, you know, habitat for our flora and fauna. And if we don't have that, what do we have? So yeah, that's where I come from an environmental perspective. And to me, it's really, really about our quality of life today, but the existence of life in the future for our, you know, our fellow Caymanians and their children.
So one of the big things that has stood out, I know we're going to talk a little bit, Wayne, about education this morning, but those comments to the question a lot of people have been discussing during this election, the overdevelopment, what they see as the overdevelopment of the Cayman Islands, often by, you know, quote unquote big developers, the constant concessions that they are receiving from government. And in some instances, allegations that they are directly impacting or destroying, in fact, our natural habitat. When you see some of the developments going up, and I mean, they're all over the island, really, but a lot of people focus on South Sound, you know, Grand Harbor. I'm always shocked at when I look at the backdrop against Grand Harbor now, how many condo units, high rises going up in 7 Mile Beach. I mean, the development is just constant. What do you think in terms of, you know, how do we reach a balance between being a country that can integrate development and projects which are needed? You know, they bring in jobs, they bring in investors, etc. Build structures that sometimes we do need, versus actually protecting the environment above all.
Well, I mean, I think it starts with a very clear structure and legislative structure, which reflects a clear policy, clear plan as to how we assess the relative values of doing these developments. You know, I think by and large for Caymanians these days, given the price range of these developments, they're not being built for Caymanians. It doesn't represent housing for Caymanians. It represents housing for, you know, multimillionaires that come here, and that, you know, very few of them actually stay. They want to have a nice place that they can call, you know, home while they visit Cayman, and enjoy, you know, the lifestyle and the quality of life that we have here. And yes, it does contribute to, you know, it adds to our domestic economy. It creates opportunities for some businesses, but, you know, the truth is less and less that is the case, because if you look at the numbers of people who are, you know, who are employed in these types of projects, many of them are are not Caymanians. I mean, we already know that we have an economy that far outstrips the ability for Caymanians themselves to fill all the jobs and participate fully. And, you know, we have some Caymanians who are unemployed, and there is this gap with trying to make sure that, you know, we get as many, if not all, Caymanians who want to work employed in any of these industries that exist in Cayman. But the bottom line is that, you know, you have to ask, who are we developing for, and who is actually benefiting. And we have to be very clear and careful about having a plan and having it done in accordance with the national conservation law, for example. You know, the government that I was a part of, we campaigned on finally getting a national conservation law in place. That it had taken 15 years of hard work to try to get something done, and we campaigned on you know, getting that in place. And I had the responsibility for the environment, so it was my job to make sure that I took the draft legislation as it was, looked at it to see whether, and discussed it with you know, the various stakeholders in government, and specifically including the Department of Environment at the time, to see whether it worked, whether it was fit for purpose, and whether it worked, or whether we needed to make some changes and tweaks. And then I went out on I went out and I did public consultations across the entire country, and I even did public consultations on multiple occasions in some districts. Like I think we did West Bay twice, but I went to Little Cayman, I went to Cayman Brac. So during my tenure as a minister, trust me, I did a lot of public consultations, and I spent a lot of time interacting with the community on these issues. But we put that in, we got that law in place. But you know, the truth is that there were some people in government who weren't particularly supportive of it, even though it was a manifesto item. There was a lot of efforts amongst the you know, let's call them the stakeholders, in terms of people that regarded themselves as directly impacted in some way. And central to those would have been, you know, developers. There was this campaign to try to create a view that the National Conservation Law was going to stop development. It was going to destroy Cayman and destroy land values and all this kind of stuff. And I think, again, that last notion comes from the idea that there is no intrinsic value to land in its natural state, when that is clearly not correct. Many developed countries try to they come up with a sort of number that they want to try to achieve in terms of preserving land in its natural state, in its natural environment, because in some cases for them, it, you know, they take up whole continents, and therefore they represent a whole range of you know, different environments, from desert to you know, heavily forested areas and whatnot. We don't have that. We've got a little island that is fringed by, you know, lots of mangrove forests, or let me rephrase that, was originally fringed by lots of mangrove forests. And then we have, you know, the usually the western and southern seashores, where it is more high ground and drier. And we've unfortunately had this view in Cayman that is too prevalent, and has existed for too long, that mangroves represent swamp, represent wasted land, and it's just an opportunity to clear all the mangroves and fill it all in and turn it into something productive. How do we fill it in? Well, we go and we dig holes all over the country to get marl to go in there and fill it in. You know, so we're taking marl from areas that are regarded as less valuable and filling in to create land that they regard as more valuable. The impact of all of that, of course, And just to give you a statistic, we've lost about 75% of the mangroves on the western peninsula of West Bay, well, from Georgetown up to West Bay. And when that happens, we're doing more than just digging holes somewhere and filling in swamp. We're destroying a natural environment that is critical to our marine environment, critical to our reef environment. It's not just a near shore issue, because a lot of the fish that live on our reefs, a lot of the fish that are essential to natural processes of keeping our reefs healthy, to even things like generating sand. A lot of them have their part of their life cycle in the mangroves. And if there are no mangroves, then there is significantly reduced habitat, or it is maybe even an elimination of the habitat for those particular species of fish. An example would be, I think, the stoplight parrotfish, that divers pay a lot of money to go and dive, and it adds immensely to our the value of our tourism product. But they actually have a juvenile stage where they live in the mangroves and grow up in the mangroves until they get to a particular size, where they then migrate out onto the reef and they spend the rest of their life living amongst the corals, etc. Those fish are essential to the health of the reef. They eat algae. They keep the reef sort of manicured. They're like some of the lawn mowers on the reef, and they keep it nice and clean and healthy. And if we remove the mangroves, we remove those fish. And if we remove those fish from the reef, then the reef starts to suffer degradation, and then our tourism product starts to suffer degradation. So lots of these things are completely interconnected. And it's important for our people to understand that, it's not just an issue of, well, boy, I like my fried squab. I like fried squab too. But we have to understand the cycle of these things. The civilization is built on accumulating knowledge and accumulating understanding. There are things that we used to do, 200 years ago. We know we can't do today. There are things we did 30 years ago that we should be learning that we can't do today. And especially when we have a significantly increasing population that is placing significantly increasing demands on our natural environment. So we have to balance all these things. And I think something like the National Conservation Law brings that balance, not fully, but it brings some balance. It was a clear attempt to put consideration of the natural environment at the same level of consideration of aesthetics, consideration of safety in terms of construction, and whether you have enough steel in your building, or your house, whether you have hurricane straps and all that. We want, the concept behind the National Conservation Law was to put consideration of the environment at the same kind of level, so that you try to get the right balance. I don't think that we're getting that balance, because we still have too many people who feel that the natural environment is not particularly relevant to them. It doesn't. Their view is, if we can't, flatten everything and fill it in and build a concrete structure on it, then it has no value to us. And that's completely wrong. And if we don't change our perspective on that, we are being terrible stewards, and we are going to create an existential problem for the people of the future, our fellow Caymanians. That's why we're at where we're at now with this issue with climate change. And we see, the Paris Accord that was entered into, and many countries committed to reducing the emissions of carbon dioxide through burning of fossil fuels to generate power. And then we have countries like the US in the last administration that made a big thing about leaving the Paris Accord because, it was going to cost the country too much. And then, the former president saying, no, we're going to bring back beautiful coal and all this sort of stuff. We can't continue with that kind of mentality. Coal is one of the worst pollutants. It's the worst way of generating power for the needs of people. And we have clean alternatives to doing that. I mean, even nuclear energy is actually a way cleaner alternative. And with new technology, that kind of thing has, the safety issues that existed in the past can be significantly reduced. Mm-hmm. But the bottom line is, this is about us being smart people, doing what we can do to improve our environment, to maintain what we have, and to improve the quality of life for our people, and to actually help reduce costs through doing these smart things, reduce costs of electricity. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the cost is going to go down today, but if we look at it over a 5 or 10 year period, we could actually significantly reduce the volatility that we have seen over the years with the price of petroleum or diesel, and we could end up having a cleaner environment and having cheaper, more reliable long-term energy. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of there's so many things that are completely interconnected. You know the movie The Lion King, and the song about the circle of life and all of that. That is what we're a part of. If we interrupt the circle of life, if we change things too much and we're all really, really intelligent, human beings that are capable of working out how to do things in even a different way that is actually more productive for us, that is safer for us, that leaves things in a better state of balance, that guarantees our future. But the question is, are we going to be smart enough to continue doing that when we have administrations or countries that elect people that operate on the basis of populism, and all they care about is the size of their bank account, and they don't care a damn about the interests of the average person, And for me, that's money. I don't love money. I love justice, and I love fairness, and I love the interests of the people, and getting the best for the people of the country. That's the kind of thing that drives me, and those are my guiding principles.
Wayne, we do have some comments that are coming in for you. I'm just going to mute you for a second. I'm still getting some feedback. Troy says that Wayne gets it. Miss Lorna says Wayne Panton is a good man. He has the country's best interests at heart. He's doing so much for so many through his own tragedy, vis-a-vis the Alex Panton Foundation. He has the knowledge, experience, and heart required to make a good MP. I trust the voters will see this and return him to Parliament on April the 14th. We have another comment that has come in by way of WhatsApp private messaging, which I'm just going to pull up here on the screen. I don't want anyone to think that I'm making these things up. So that's why I just screen grabbed this part of it to kind of show you here. But this person has shared that, sorry, let me take the other comment down, that Wayne Panton is our first political environmental champion, abused, maligned, and thrown under the bus by the Alden, McKeeva, PPM Progressives, UDP, CDP, Unity Government, and now the Alliance, whatever that really is. He has successfully persevered against all of these environmentally destructive governments, politicians, and developers. He will return to government on April the 14th and continue his Cayman Islands benefiting environmental work. Wow. And if you had any clue who that was coming from, trust me, that's quite an endorsement from this particular individual. And I've got some other comments here. Let me just see if they were relevant to our discussion. One person says, my fear of the development, Cayman, is that the government has been in bed with the devil for far too long. Can we really take control of our island and stop here? Enough is enough. We blame Hurricane Ivan for the scarce breadfruit trees. Now the coconut trees, you can barely find anymore. Come on, stop this. Let me just unmute you there. So yes, Wayne, so some comments there coming in. Lots of people really concerned about the environment. Now, I know that we said this morning that we'd focus more on education, but you've been educating us on the environment here this morning, which I think is so incredibly important. Like, I'm still in awe of people who believe that they can go out, for example, on a fishing trip and just overfish and, take out of not just marine protected zones, but even in other areas, take way more lobster, take the smallest lobsters, not throw them back in, and not think that all of that has an impact on what future generations will be able to get from the ocean, as well as even with the current generation. Because I hear enough of them complaining, boy, when I was a kid, you could go out there and get lobsters by the drove. I mean, the entire earth is under a lot of pressure. And Wayne, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has given us an opportunity and given Mother Earth a little bit of a breather, a little bit of a break. It was astonishing within the first couple months of this pandemic. Things like the mountains in India could be seen for the first time in 2-3 generations because the air was so much clearer because people were being forced to stay home under these quarantine provisions, just giving the earth an opportunity to breathe, the air to cleanse itself, all of the pollutants. Fish that hadn't been seen in murky waters, all of a sudden people could look in the water and see them. So the earth has been given a little bit of a break because of this pandemic, which has been forcing human beings to adjust their behavior. And I thought, isn't that amazing? Although this pandemic is huge and it's a big deal and it's impacting everyone in the world, just telling people to stay home has had such an immense and immediate impact on the earth. Imagine what other little changes we could implement that could go a long way. What sort of changes do you think right here in the Cayman Islands, whether it's recycling initiatives, have a walk to work day or busing system once a month? What sort of real projects or initiatives do you see that could work for our community here in the Cayman Islands that would also help, nature, help the environment?
Well, I mean, public transport, we can talk about improving public transport to the point where, and I'm talking about electrifying public transport, meaning, I don't mean streetcars with electric grids. I mean, utilizing electric buses, for example. We need to make an investment in public transport to try to provide a more reliable system that works well, that works on time, that doesn't pollute, and that has the capacity, so that we can say to the country, look, we're a very car-centric society. We don't have to get in a car and drive everywhere. We can leave our car home one day, walk to the corner, catch a bus, and just enjoy the ride, and enjoy chatting with people maybe you haven't seen in a long time, maybe you never saw them before, and you get to know people who are fellow residents or fellow members of your community, and you're reducing traffic on the roads, so that sort of thing I think is essential. That has to be a part of our traffic management solution, because we don't have an unlimited landmass. We can't continue to just build roads. We need to make changes with how the planning process interacts with the with the National Conservation Council, for example. And I don't mean this fear that the National Conservation Council is going to have the power to dictate everything that happens. I mean, actually, legitimately considering the recommendations that are made so that you arrive at a better decision. And I want government to be committed to these kinds of things, and not view it as as an inconvenience, because it's not an inconvenience. It's an absolute necessity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let me just take an example, right? We have a lot of activity going on now. We're 5 weeks away from an election, and we have a lot of activity going on paving roads, trying to start new roads.
Mm-hmm.
One of the areas that I've had a lot of sympathy has been the fact that from Savannah going east, there is only really one way to go, and one route. And if that route is blocked for some reason, and I've experienced it in the past myself, where I've been up east and coming back down at 12 o'clock at night, and there's been a road accident, and it's got to be investigated, and there's debris all over the place. Thankfully, in that case, no one was killed, but I had to turn around and go back to my brother's house and spend the night there because you can't get past, So I have a lot of sympathy with the traffic situation up from our area, and it still exists now going east of Savannah because there is only one path. And I wanted the government to work on doing the east-west extension past Hirsch Road going east. Now, the problem there is that the significant portions of that road actually go through the edge of the central mangrove wetland, which is a very, very critical environmental area for the country. From 2015, I told my colleagues that, and I didn't just do it because it wasn't my decision, but I told my colleagues that an environmental impact assessment would have been required to do that road. There has been massive pushback about that. Oh, why do we have to do that? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. In fact, my friend, the premier, he made a comment in the LA on one occasion where he, I think a lot of people took him to be saying that the entire national conservation law was ridiculous. Maybe that's what he was thinking too. I don't know. Maybe they have a better handle on what he was thinking than I do. But in the context of what he said and when he said it, I knew what he was saying was it was ridiculous that government needs to do an environmental impact assessment to build roads. And I couldn't disagree with him more. Our colleagues in Jamaica have to do environmental impact assessments when they're building roads. I mean, they have a lot of consequences too. I mean, if they build a road and it's in an area where you could have a landslide, or it could actually cut off the normal flow of water, and you end up having a flash flood that washes away a section of road with people driving on it, that's life and death. So they do environmental impact assessments. Even Belize does environmental impact assessments. Bermuda does environmental impact assessments. I mean, they're at the point where they can't build any more roads themselves either. So they take other means of addressing, and have done for a long time, I should say, take other means of addressing the traffic problems. But that road from 2015, they were told, and then formally, I think when they actually applied to do the road, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, they were told then they needed an environmental impact assessment, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it because they just thought, to hell with this. We don't support the National Conservation Council, and we don't think that it's necessary to do this. So there's a total lack of commitment to doing things in the right way. And why do you need to do an environmental impact assessment? Well, you'll remember, I think it was during the 2012, 2013, 14, might have been as late as 2015, we had some really heavy rains over that period of time at I think a couple of different years, which caused a lot of flooding in places like Gun Square, and in the back of Gun Square, down by the National Trust Mission House and by Miss Josie Park, and all the people that live down Mihal Road, Miss Mary's area, Miss Twyla, God bless her, that recently passed away. Those areas were flooded. Why were they flooded? Because why did they suffer so much flooding? And when they hadn't in the past, it's because the back road, the Anton Bodden Road, was built without any culverts. It was raised up. There was no real thought given to what happens with the normal water flow, the normal drainage. And that's a big problem that we have in Cayman. A lot of development, a lot of planning is done and approved without any thought to an overall drainage management plan. So if we build this highway going up there and we cut off, we don't put culverts in the right places for water, for example, and channels for water to get under it and stuff that would ordinarily drain into the central mangrove areas. Who knows what impacts we have? Right. And then that's separate and apart from, the impact on the flora and the fauna in the area, and there are things that, that steps we could take to mitigate, those impacts. All those things are just it's just common sense stuff, but we have to commit to doing it in that way, and it doesn't take long. The view is, it's going to cost millions of dollars to do an environmental impact assessment, and it's going to take a year. Well, if they were being told from 2015 that they had to do it, we're now in 2021, and they're just now trying to clean up some areas there to extend the road up to behind Realty Drive. Come on, if you had done it back then, you would have had the opportunity to build the whole road, possibly, in the last 4 or 5 years. So I don't know. I just find it very frustrating that there isn't a commitment to these types of issues. There isn't longer term planning and longer term thinking about how we end up with, a stronger, better community for all of us. And that's not just those issues and the failure to plan. I heard somebody talking last night about, for example, the development review plan, or the development review that's required under the development planning law. That hasn't been done. The law requires it to be done every 5 years, and it hasn't been done since 1997. And I can tell you, during my term in government, there were some heated discussions about it, saying, why aren't we doing it? And the response I got was, I don't care, GD, I am not going to do it. I didn't get a satisfactory explanation. I got an expletive-laden refusal to consider, doing these kinds of things. And I don't believe we shouldn't do something just because it's perceived to be difficult to do it. I can tell you, Sandra, that I look around and I'm happy to see young people being concerned about the environment. I am happy to see older people being concerned about the environment now. I am happy to see political candidates talking about the importance of the environment, because the 4 years that I sat as the minister talking about these things and trying to relate it to real life and trying to tell people about the real life impacts, the real life benefits, the real life value that it presents to us, I feel it wasn't wasted after all, because there were times when I felt frustrated and I felt downtrodden. I probably felt like I could have been close to tears about it. But I didn't, it felt frustrating that something that is obvious, people just don't get, they don't want to get, because they are driven by profit over people. They're driven by greed, by the desire for more. And I just don't feel, and I can't justify, us being able to prosper for our generation to prosper at the expense of the generations in the future. It's not right. I think I saw an article written recently, or an editorial or something written recently, talking about the definition of sustainable development. And I'm probably going to paraphrase because I can't say I remember it exactly, but the reference was to the simplest definition that was given, the most attractive definition that was given was, doing what we need to do today to meet our needs without compromising the ability of our children tomorrow to meet their needs. And to me, I believe in keeping things as simple as possible, for us to try to understand it and implement it. And that's the approach I think we should take. We have to take a sustainable development approach. I'm not against development. I'm against unbridled development where we can't demonstrate any real benefits to our country and our people, where we are using up resources and impacting our country in ways that we can't really demonstrate benefits to our people. And that's if we're not doing it with that in mind, why in the world are we doing it? It can't just be because somebody says, hey, I'm going to make a buck doing this. And by the way, government, give me $3 million in concessions in order to do it, so I can make a few extra bucks too.
Wow.
I don't know.
It's I'm surprised, Wayne, as we kind of wrap up a little bit with you, that government doesn't seem to be capable of learning. And I mean, like the political arms. I think, for example, even when they paved, like just repaving of a street, when they redid Smith Road a number of years ago, that impact a lot of the businesses in that area, from Pasadora Place, which are already prone to flooding, to others, because now you're building up the road higher than the surrounding land area, and you're not putting in any additional drainage along the way to try to help offset that. There have been areas of South Sound, again, that are prone to flooding because of the way that public roads, not even private development, because private development is one thing, but how do we hope to control private developers if, as you say, government themselves are not appreciating why it's necessary to do certain things like environmental impact studies? I mean, we saw the whole situation with the port, and I don't know if you ever publicly spoke out about the whole port fiasco, but, again, the government's desire to try to marginalize sometimes their own civil servants who have the requisite knowledge and expertise, whether it's Miss Gina Petrie or others, and telling people to ignore them, that we don't need environmental impact studies, we don't need this, we don't need that. Help it make sense, because it really doesn't to me.
Yeah, I don't know. Let me start by saying that we have some heroes, and let me be upfront and say that I have a conflict in the sense that my son is a marine biologist. I raised him, and I used to take my kids out boating with me all the time, and I would always, it wasn't just about going out and having fun and jumping in the water and swimming around. It was about talking to them about the marine environment, talking about them about, the way everything is connected, the way life works, and every part of life is connected, the chains of life, and I didn't know that he was learning anything, and I didn't even know that he was listening to me half the time, but he ended up getting the highest grade in the world in, I think it was, I don't know if it was A level or whether it was the AS level, but he and another girl from Cayman Prep School got the highest grade in the world in marine biology, and they did those exams. And so I'm not surprised that he ended up being a marine biologist after that. But I was pleased that he was actually absorbing some of the things I was saying and talking about, even as a layman. I mean, he obviously knows way more, and he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about it now. But we have people in our Department of Environment who are unsung heroes, right? Who are incredible people that have contributed so much, even to our, like our tourism product exists today because of them, because of their commitment, because of their hard work, because of their drive, even in circumstances where the government of the day had no appreciation for them, and did their best to minimize their contributions. And I think, people like Gina, I am totally proud of her. I know how she's been vilified and attacked, and you can understand when somebody is constantly berated, why sometimes they may lash out a little bit. But I can tell you, Gina has been, she has been very reserved based on the way, some people have treated her in the past. And she is driven by one thing, and that is what is best for Cayman. I've had discussions with her where she acknowledges that, we have to compromise on this or compromise on that in order to get this, in order for the greater good to exist and all of that. But there's always this view that, oh, Gina's against everything. And therefore, by extrapolation, it's everything the DOE does is against everybody else. That's not true at all. Let me give you a local example of what you were talking about the roads, right? We've had roads that were recently, government has the NRA has a long-term plan for doing different roads and stuff, and they sort of prioritize things based on how long it's been and how bad the road has gotten. And I've seen roads done in Newlands, right, where the road is built up, the new tarmac is put on, and there seems to be absolutely no consideration given to the fact that you're then creating a situation where the house next to the road or the houses next to the road are down in the bottom of a bowl, because the road was first of all built, at the height that it was. The houses were then built at the height they were, which was basically, maybe a little bit higher than the road or the same height as the road. But then you come in and you redo the road and you build the road up another 4, 5, 6 inches. You got a nicely surfaced new road. But then where does the water go? The water gets trapped into people's yards then. It flows off the road, it flows around drains from other areas, and it ends up going into people's yards and creating flooding in their yards. And this is what I talk about a proper national drainage plan. We need that in place. We need normal drainage practices to be in place so that we can avoid these types of situations. Because I see people now having to fill up around their doorways and create like a berm so that the water doesn't end up flowing into their doors and flooding out their houses. It should not be the case that the person who built 30 years ago ends up at the bottom of a bowl because everybody around them, planning says, well, raise up your property and then build. And the guy who first built ends up at the bottom of the bowl, and he's the one that ends up getting flooded. That's the kind of thing that I've seen it happen too often in businesses in Georgetown. I've seen it happen in homes in Newlands. I've seen it happen in all over the country. And why is it? And there's another crazy thing that I've seen. I mean, when we had the wider Panton as a multi-member, I remember seeing roads built in Belford, which has traditionally had a lot of flooding problems. And I'm not trying to criticize anybody. Maybe I'd like to know for myself because it doesn't make sense to me. But I've seen them doing deep wells in the middle of the road and putting the drain right in the middle of the road. How, if you're putting a deep well on the crown of the road, which is the highest point of the road, how is it that how does that help anything? That's like saying, well, we're going to make sure the flood water only gets so high, and after that it'll drain. But when it gets so high, it's going to flood. It's going to flood the the houses out anyway. And once water gets into people's homes, even if whether it's 3 inches of water or a foot of water, That's a lot of problems. So we need to address these things. You look in, Florida takes a different approach. They require developments to create swales, to create drainage areas. I mean, I have to say there is one place down in Newlands where the developer actually did it properly, and they created these swales on the roadside where there was drainage, and water could drain into safely and move off into other areas. But we can't just look at one little small area, one little 5-acre development and say, yeah, well, we can put deep wells in here and that'll be fine. It isn't. And I'll tell you why. We, in low-lying areas, and a lot of Newlands is relatively low-lying, deep wells are not the solution. They're not going to work. You can ask the people from the NRA. They know it's not going to work. The chairman of the NRA knows it's not going to work. The former chairman of the NRA knows that it doesn't work. But people keep doing the same things, and government keeps saying, yeah, we'll just put in a deep well for you. When you have a deep well and the water table is just 2 or 3 feet below the surface, there is no way that a deep well is going to properly drain anything. It might work for 5 minutes. So it works for a normal little rain, half decent rain shower. But when we have what the old people used to call a set rain, or all day set rain, you ain't getting no drainage out of that. And that's when we have the flooding and stuff. And we just got to do better with our planning and thinking about these things, and try to do it right, even if it's different from how we have traditionally done it.
Right. Wow, well, that's a lot. That's a lot for us to take in this morning, Wayne. Thank you so much for joining us.
You asked me to come and talk about education, and all I did was talk about education in relation to the environment.
Well, that's okay, because it's still educating us.
I want to say something very quickly. Sure. I know that there are people who think that I'm an environmental zealot, right? And that means that somehow they think that's a danger or something. I am nothing of the sort. But I'm a realist, and I understand the real life impacts on people, and I understand what we need to do in order to try to get the balance right, to really truly achieve sustainable development. I believe in development for our people. I believe in infrastructure for our people. But why can't we do it the right way? Why can't we use the knowledge that we have gained? Why can't we look at how other countries have done things and had better results? Everybody just wants to do it the same old way, the easy way, the cheap way. And then we have the consequences down the road that we have, and without any, and it's just, oh, well, that's the price of progress. No, it's not. It's being silly, and it's a disservice to the people of the country who pay the taxes for the work that so that you can do the work that you're doing for them. Do it right to begin with. Right. Education, that's a whole broad subject, and that's another one of the things that we spend a lot of money on, and we haven't really had the kind of results that we need to have. We need to have a world-class education so that our kids cannot just get jobs in Cayman, but can go out and compete in the rest of the world, so that they can go out and get the kinds of experience in the rest of the world if they want to, and they can then come back to Cayman, make their home here, make their lives here, and bring all that education back and contribute significantly to the quality of life, to the types of businesses and industries that we need in Cayman to diversify our economy, to make it stronger. At the end of the day, if we don't have a strong economy, if we don't have opportunities for people, then we're failing there too. But we can, following the right approach and planning and thinking and being smart, we can have a balance where we have a strong economy, we're protecting the environment, we're doing things that benefit people and improves their quality of life, improves opportunities for Caymanians. There is no reason why we can't achieve, a balance of all of these things. And just just because we talk about things like the environment doesn't mean that means that's going to impact the economy. I mean, we've had the National Conservation Law in place now since the end of, well, it came into effect in stages following the passage in 2013. But a few years ago, the government was saying, oh, well, the National Conservation Law is a problem and it's got to be amended. Guess what? They set up a committee to review it, and then they had to abandon that committee because it became very clear that those people that were driving the agenda to make changes to try to dismantle the National Conservation Law did not have the support of the people, and they lost their arguments on their merits. They were losing their arguments on their merits. And, they realized that they were going down a losing path, and they had to give it up. So we've never heard, we had 3 meetings of that committee, and we've never heard a thing about it since. Yet we hear that, the National Conservation Law was a problem. And at the same time, we have the Minister for Planning and Infrastructure making statements that, the economy is going great. And, well, I guess the Finance Minister was saying that too, and the Premier. But specifically, the other Minister for Infrastructure and Planning was talking about the record numbers of planning applications that had been approved and the record number of projects that were underway. But you can't have a law that's an impediment to development and at the same time have record development going on. It's something isn't right there, right? That story doesn't gel. So, and I know what the story is. The story is the National Conservation Law in and of itself is fine. But what tends to happen too often is the recommendations from the National Conservation Council are given very little weight. And they tend to be dismissed more often than not. And you remember the argument that, oh, the National Conservation Council was given all this power. They weren't given any pilot power. What they were given was the power to make. They were given the right to be considered, the right to make recommendations, but those recommendations are not binding. And I don't think they should be binding, except in certain cases, as they are when it impacts an area that is a protected area. But we should have a better approach, a better commitment to considering the impacts across the board, including environmental impacts, because those environmental impacts are not just things that are airy-fairy that are out there on their own. Those are things that have an impact on people's enjoyment and quality of life, and whether their house gets flooded, whether their businesses get flooded, things like that. Those are real life quantifiable economic impacts on people.
Wayne,
anyway.
Thank you. It was a lot. One question coming in quickly from Quincy. He wants to know whether or not you would work with Kenneth Bryan, Dr. Frank, Elvis, and Isaac if you got elected.
Listen, I will work with. First of all, when you have an election, if you are chosen by the people to represent them, there are others that are equally chosen as well, and you have to. At the morning after, you look around the table and see who's there, and you have to decide, how you can work with people. And if people are committed to non-ego driven agendas, which are for the interests of the people of the country, then I don't have a problem in working with them. The people have decided that's who they want to represent them, and as long as they're going to act, in a reasonable way, in a way which is constructive for the benefit of their constituents, but equally so the collective benefit of the whole country. I don't have any issue working with people. when they're acting in good faith along those lines.
Thank you, my friend. All right, so thanks guys so much for tuning in. We've got Alric Lindsay who's up next, and we're sticking a little bit closer to the time frames. I do have an 11 o'clock appointment. Wayne, we will see you again. Let me just check my calendar here. I gotta be on top of my bookings and my calendar. Now today is the 4th. Yes. So Wayne will be back with us on the 18th. Part of his working team, community creates country. We have Ozzy who's coming up next week. No, my apologies. Wayne is back next week on the 9th. And then we've got Ozzy on the 11th and Heather on the 16th. So folks, you will have an opportunity to hear more from Wayne Panton for sure, hear more from Heather Bodden for sure, and also more from Osborne Bodden as well. So Wayne, we appreciate it. Wishing you a super productive day on the campaign trail, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you very much, and God bless and wonderful. Wish a wonderful day to all Caymanians.
Awesome, Mr. Alric, you're up next. Alric is probably sitting here thinking, "Boy, I remember the days on CMR when I could come on for the full 2 hours." Now political season is upon us, Alric, and times are busy. So I know that this week you actually attended an environmental meeting of some sort yourself, and you were also very passionate about the environment. So as we were having the discussions with Wayne, we wanted to give him ample opportunity, but I was kind of thinking in the back of my head, a lot of this Alric would be very interested in discussing as well. So tell us a little bit, if you can, about the meeting you attended this week. What was that all about?
The meeting was focused on renewable energy and whether or not there was going to be a monopoly on renewable energy by CUC in the future. So the scenario that we want in Cayman is that we can try to reduce the cost of living by introducing solar, making solar more affordable, etc. We should, for example, we have a lot of big buildings in Cayman. Government has big buildings. There are a lot of large warehouses where solar can be put on the top of it. However, in the presentation for renewable energy, some of the information that was given to us is that essentially the monopoly for electricity right now may actually become the monopoly for renewable energy in the future, which basically means that we're not really going to get a deal at the end of the day. So basically, the current monopoly would switch out from its monopoly in electricity and then eventually have a monopoly on renewable energy. I think that it seems that there's a fear that that is where Cayman is going, rather than trying to truly get people to get affordable solar and reduce their cost of living and their light bill. So that was a main concern coming out of that, and also whether or not OFREG is actually doing its job in terms of regulation. So that was a summary of that. But I wanted to touch on some of the things that Wayne was talking about earlier. When we the main issue we have in Cayman is like population is really out of control. So I'm gonna share something with you. It's the population scenarios. I just put it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, when you look at the 2007 population scenarios, you'll see that you remember when Cayman population was like 25,000, and when you look at the population now, it's like around near 70,000.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the data on the ESO.ky website, ESO.ky, that shows you a lot of statistics about Cayman, including population. So when you look at it, we have a population that's basically tripled during our lifetime. And at the same time, we have an infrastructure that is struggling to keep up. The problem is we don't really have a plan. What we've been doing is we've been bragging about how much development we're going to have, how many buildings we're going to have, how many fees we're going to earn from those developments, but there's actually no plan. When you look at the facts, my understanding is that the first development plan was 1977. The next development plan was 1997. And I do understand that there were some proposals for amendment to the development plan in 2002, but we haven't seen anything come out of that. So basically, we have over 20 years of no plan. So when we boast about, all this development, just remember that we actually don't have an updated plan to work on. So it's nothing to boast about that we have all this development because we have no plan, right? So again, the first plan was 1977. The next plan was 1997. Proposals for review of the plan, 2002. And we haven't really heard anything since. So to give people an idea of what a development plan was really about, it's supposed to be this long range plan to deal with the physical sort of use of land in the Cayman Islands. The problem is we're supposed to have this comprehensive plan that is supposed to be updated basically every 5 years. But if you note that the last plan was 1997, if it's supposed to be updated every 5 years, obviously something is wrong, right? So when we look at, we also have this national planning framework that was discussed, right? So the national planning framework, I think, was drafted around 2018, 2019, and I think was meant to be approved by cabinet. No one is really sure what actions have been taken. But to give you an idea of some of the things you were talking about earlier in terms of the drainage, et cetera, the national planning framework that was drafted, and I'm not sure if it was ever approved by cabinet, it has certain goals. So when you were talking about subdivisions earlier, I have some notes here. So the goal 2 under the national planning framework, when you're talking about these subdivisions and drainage, it says it shall ensure residential subdivision is well designed and protects natural resources. So the objective is that with residential subdivisions, it's supposed to embrace, Cayman's natural environment by retaining natural vegetation, the landscape features, environmentally significant elements, and trying to control the storm wall, water runoffs, and protecting your property from damage. So that's an objective set out in the draft national planning framework that I understand. I'm not sure if it's actually been approved by cabinet. So to deal with the drainage items you're talking about earlier, some of the action items under the national planning framework would be to create design standards for new subdivisions, which take into consideration existing landscaping and connectivity with other developments. You're supposed to require submission of a tree, native plant, and habitat survey with all subdivision applications. You're supposed to require developers to put in sidewalks that are sensitive to the vegetative features prior to final approval of the housing scheme. So these things appear to be in draft form, but they don't appear to actually be approved by cabinet, speaking of the national planning framework. So we seem to be rushing ahead, speeding ahead with all this development, but it's actually out of control because none of the laws appear to have been updated to take into consideration how fast the population is growing and how we are changing the natural state of Cayman. Cayman is starting to look like somewhere else. So if we had that development plan updated from 1997, we could steer our course towards something. Right now, we are steering our course towards something that we're never going to recognize, that is Cayman in the future. Talk about the protected areas. Looking back, when Prince Charles was here, I think the government agreed that the marine parks were going to be expanded, but I don't think anything has been done. So we have a lot of conversations and no action taking place. So I think over the years, there's been a lot of discussion with fishermen, because obviously Caymanian fishermen are fishing for a living. So you have to discuss these plans with the fishermen as well. So the idea is to expand the marine parks, but also consider that our fishermen also have to make a living. So it just seems like the government has been talking about these things, but in terms of putting things in place and taking action, that's what's important, taking action, not just talking about things. So it doesn't appear that the government has done anything to enact the expansion of protected areas from marine parks. So when you look at the land itself on the ground, since the National Conservation Law was passed, there have been two gazetted sort of areas, two rounds of protected areas. One was 2017, and other was 2018. And let me see if I can share. I'll share those links with you so that your viewers can actually look at these things themselves, right? So first, I will share what is on a national. I'm going to share the national planning framework so everyone can see it, which is supposed to be approved by cabinet, but I'm not sure what the status is. So share that.
Now, Alric, I'm aware that your time is a little bit short today because I do have to run to.
Yeah,
that's
okay.
I want us to delve into this a little bit deeper, because what I really like here, I'm looking at some of this for the first time myself personally, and I see under the notation section of the first link that you shared, saying that it's difficult to find a country that has experienced recent population growth at a rate similar to the Cayman Islands. This actually goes into further details in terms of our our population growth and how that impacts a lot of different areas, including the environment, which Wayne Panton was speaking about, and which you yourself, also have some concerns about. So future population growth of the Cayman Islands, even from the 1960s to the 1970s, was significant based on this document that you've actually provided here. And thank you so much for providing this. What I want to say to people is this is where we are getting deep into the details, right? And the only way for us to find solutions, folks, to the issues that are facing this country, whether they're environmental, education, traffic woes, all of those things are impacted by our growth. So we hear some politicians, for example, who are of the opinion that we need to quickly get to 100,000 growth. They've not explained why that's a magical number. I think Wayne Panton addressed that before. There's no explanation as to how, if these growth paths that this document discussed, going back to 2006, have never really been analyzed and addressed, how is it then that we can properly plan for any measure of growth, whether it's to 75,000, 100,000, or whatever, if we have not looked in detail at what the numbers have told us, what they suggest is happening, and how we can move forward in a managed growth scenario, protecting our environment, protecting our people. All of these things are incredibly important. So whilst I do have to put the conversation in pause, here it says that, if we are at a population of 96,000 in 20 years by 2026, that's a 3% population growth, and that appears to be the rate. And that's a conservative view, because remember now the 3% growth track isn't unreasonable. And some even think that it's conservative to put it at 4.3% growth over the past 36 years. So 3% in light of that seems to be reasonable. Folks, it gets deep, but if we don't understand what any of this means, and we don't have politicians who are willing to go beyond the surface and who are willing to go deeper on these issues, we will never find viable solutions to any of our problems. So understand what I'm telling you, okay? Population from 1970 quadrupled from what it was. Let me just pull this. I'm just going to go back to what I just read here because I did see it. So the conclusions were, number one, the population of the Cayman Islands has risen at a steady rate for over 30 years with an average growth of 4.3% per year. Most of that is due to net immigration more than natural increase by Caymanians. So what that means is this isn't a population growth because we are having children. This is a population growth because we are importing individuals into this country, something that we have a lot of control over, by the way, right? Then it talks about the net immigration growth is an expression of confidence in Cayman's economy by all, including investors, consumers, and employees. That's fantastic. And Wayne said at the beginning of, his discussion on the environment that confidence is important because the economic development of the country is important, but we can't have economic development that only benefits a select few or largely a select few, even within the expat population, and not the average Caymanian. If we're increasing the size of the pie, in my humble opinion, that should be something that should be beneficial to all who are willing to partake. Not everybody's going to eat pie. And unfortunately, there will be some people who, for different reasons, might be difficult to bring along with their success story, but we have to try our best to make sure that it is inclusive with as many possible people as practical. So Alric, I do want us to go into this a little bit deeper, but I'm short on time now. We're at the 10:30 hour. We are a little bit an hour over. Can I put this on pause for us to have a deeper discussion on this particular topic of population growth and management and your environmental concerns in relation to that as well?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's also, as you appreciate, a lot of these documents are long documents and, people just don't have the time to go through all of them. So what we try to do is we try to go through them and try to make people more aware of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in Cayman is that the government markets things to us in a nice way that we can consume. But a lot of times that marketing doesn't let you know about the details that hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about the fact that our first development plan was 1977, the next one was 1997. Like what's happened since 1997? Well, what we did was we put profits over people. And so we just raised the head, invited whichever developer to come into Cayman, gave those developers all these concessions, and we failed to update a development plan. So 1997 to now, no updates. And we have all this development out of control. So while I would love to go deeper into the topic, we also don't want to lose people. We want to include all of Cayman in a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I think describing those things in that way shows you, number one, there's no plan.
Mm-hmm.
We have an outdated plan from 1997. And since, as you can see, population has been skyrocketing and the government is talking about, 100,000 population, 150K population. But we want to grow the population without considering the impacts of that growth. And we want to grow it. We want to grow all these buildings and build everything else without having an updated plan. I mean, these are just common sense things. I mean, so yeah, we can discuss it in more detail on another show. But the only other thing I want to mention was the Environmental Protection Fund. And I'm not going to go into this, but one of the concerns is whether the funds that are in the Environmental Protection Fund are being used for the proper purpose. And I know that in 2018, $10 million was used to buy beaches, but we don't know how much of that money was used for other purposes, right? So, 2015, we have $2.5 million from the Environmental Protection Fund being used towards the port. And I don't think that was an intended purpose of the Environmental Protection Fund. And so, I'll put that link up on your site as well, so your viewers can see that we're talking about facts. But yeah, so we need to audit the Environmental Protection Fund as well. And when elected, I will call for that to be done, an audit of that Environmental Protection Fund to see how it was being used over the past couple of years, and to make sure that it was being used for protected areas and not some marketing against the port. But so we can go into this another day. But I think that we can't. What I always say is that we can't breathe buildings. I'm not against development. What I think we need is to have a plan in place that considers our future. If we just build buildings for the sake of profits, then we're just gonna, we're gonna lose what's unique to us, and we're gonna lose what makes us breathe. So yeah. So look forward to another day to go over this in more detail with you.
Thank you so much, Alric. Really appreciate it. Folks, again, we are an hour into overtime. I anticipated it a little bit, but I do have to run for an 11 o'clock appointment. That's all the way in West Bay Road, so I've got to skedoodle out of here. But Alric, thank you so much. Thank you so much to Mario Ebanks, who joined us at the top of the show today, and of course to Mr. Wayne Panton. So I wish to remind all candidates, we do have Mr. McCleary Frederick, who will be joining us on Monday. Tomorrow, we have Andre Ebanks joining us for the first time, as well as Samuel Jackson, aka Sammy Jackson, will be here joining us. And of course, the beautiful Sabrina Turner. So another full day of guests joining tomorrow's program as well. So make sure you tune in for Fab Fridays. We're going to bring it to you. And I want to talk more between now and Monday about our new senior initiative, trying to bridge the gap between technology and access technology for our seniors. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my vision for that. So folks, thank you as always for tuning in, making Cayman Mall Road not just your number one spot for news, but also your number one location for all things related to life here in the Cayman Islands and what's happening here. And of course, this hard, cold truth is your number one, without a doubt, morning talk show. And don't forget to check out our sister sites, caymandecides.com, and all of the election news that has been posted online there as well.